Leading procurement organizations are constantly reimagining their processes and operating models. But in today's unpredictable and fast-changing world, they're under more pressure than ever to deliver a high-level roadmap to building the procurement function of tomorrow. In Transform, a thought-provoking new podcast series from Art of Procurement, in partnership with Globality, we spotlight the agenda-setting procurement leaders and companies who are changing the game and redefining the future of procurement. And for this second episode in this special series, I talked with Adam Brown, head of the Procurement Digital Garage and Senior Manager of Transformation at BT Sourced, procurement company of BT. Adam and the team at BT Sourced are leading the way in transforming the role and the impact of procurement beyond our traditional boundaries. And today I wanted to talk to him about that transformation and the building of a digital procurement ecosystem to enable it. So let's go straight into the interview, where I start by asking Adam if he could share a little bit more about his background.
Yeah, hi Phil. I started off originally sort of way back in actually in engineering and in research, even before getting into the commercial side. But at some point, I did do a couple of startups, and then came to my senses and found my way into consultancy and sales and transformation. And because of my kind of sales specialism, if you like, I then jumped over the fence and became this category manager for a short period of time, before then kind of pulling together that history of engineering and research, which gives me that kind of understanding about software and tools.
Right.
And pulled that together then with the transformation stuff, and found myself in this digital transformation world that I've been in now for a number of years. So it all came together rather neatly.
So you got a pretty diverse background coming into procurement, which I think is always really useful because you have like that empathy with all the stakeholders that you're working with.
Yeah, exactly. And I found it is the most useful thing to have some knowledge about software engineering, have some knowledge about how these tools are actually created. So then it then triggers the mind on how you can better link tools together to then go ahead and not just view things in isolation, but how you can link tools together and create more of an ecosystem, if you like.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about ecosystems actually in a few minutes. Before I do, I just want, for context really, to talk about the journey that you were on at BT and BT Source to transform procurement. And I just wonder if you could share just a little bit about, why was this transformation needed for BT of procurement to begin with?
I guess like any big company, we've always done a level of reinvention periodically, maybe every 3 or so years. Business needs change, and so as a company, as a function within a company, you also need to change to reflect the needs of our internal customers. But there does come a point, particularly with procurement, as has been proved by many other companies, that does reach a point where if you really want to take it up to that next level, you need to reinvent as a complete professional services organization. And for procurement, it's all about how do we get more spend under control? How do we get a more robust, a more professionalized relationship with our customer to drive our own behaviors, but also drive the behaviors better in the organization to really enable us to scale up what we're doing. And that was one of the drivers behind the transformation that you see with creating BT Sourced. It was to take that internal corporate function. And whilst you are an internal corporate function, it's always easy to have that direct relationship with people. And it's to level that up. You would always want to have you always have a more robust and a more challenging, and you have a better ability to challenge with a supplier or with a customer when you have that supplier and customer relationship, rather than just an internal as an internal function. So that was one of the big drivers to do it, is to recognize that, and how can we then really bring even more benefit to BT as our customer, as our number one. And that's why we did that, and also taking the opportunity to say, if we're reinventing an organization, not just as an internal transformation, but reinventing and rebuilding from the ground up with a complete clean sheet, what would you actually do if you, I mean, what an
Hmm.
opportunity, right? To say,
Right.
create from
Greenfield site
scratch.
in a big organization.
Yeah, create from scratch a procure code that
Yeah.
already has an enormous customer. So, how do you build that from scratch, including all of the digitization, the digital tech, reinventing the process and the policies and the procedures from scratch without having to, um, think, yeah, we just inherited stuff. Yeah, we had that opportunity. Um, and so that's why we created BT Sourced and didn't just stop there, but re-headquartered it into a brand new country as well
Hmm.
to go even further. And you see the likes of this with the other big procure codes that we all know and love around Europe with other telcos and other industries.
You mentioned it before. You were talking about the BT sauce journey, which is a journey that I actually, I love the journey because we've long advocated for this idea of procurement operating as a business, and thinking about a business, thinking about it from a sales perspective, from a marketing perspective. Everything is different from a mindset when you're looking at yourself as a service provider than it is when you're a function,
Mm.
because you really got to be on the ball, and it's about delivery. It truly is about delivery. You can't hide anywhere when you're a service provider. Um, you talked a little bit about ecosystems and digital ecosystems being at the forefront of this transformation, um, and thinking about it from a best of breed perspective. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more behind, like, why go so heavily into digital, and the thinking behind this kind of ecosystem model, as opposed to just going and making a couple of big purchases and bringing in a couple of big suite providers.
Mm. Well, there's so many things which lead us to this point, and we have, number one, has always got to start with our people, and we're a procurement company, so we hire people for their brains, for their mental ability, for their
Hmm.
shrewd negotiations, for their capabilities to be the best procurement people, the best category managers, the best strategists, the best negotiators. We hire them for that. We don't hire them because they're amazing at PowerPoint or
Right.
amazing at Excel or amazing at sending emails. We really don't. But we find in procurement, probably like most um, organizations, you spend a huge amount of time in analyzing spend, in presenting strategies, and you inevitably find yourself spending a lot of time in these tools. PowerPoint, Excel, they are wonderful things, but if we can stop people having to do that, then they can spend more time on what we're really paying them for, their brains. And that's the thing which people love to do. I don't know
Mhm.
anybody who says, oh, yeah, I really get a kick out of making sure all of my boxes in PowerPoint line up perfectly.
Right.
But so that was the number one. How can we do that? And the obvious thing is find out what people are spending a lot of time doing. If they're doing the Excel or the PowerPoint, what's the requirement that's feeding that? And it's
Mhm.
data and it's insights and it's getting your hands on that data and insights and generating them. So the digitization really started to say, well, how can we solve for that problem? How can we put all of this information at the fingertips and then drive the insights automatically without people having to go in and analyze and do pivot tables and things. So that's why we started off. And with procurement, you have to have a really good handle on your spend. You
Mhm.
need to know the spend. You need to understand where is it going, what are the categories, with what suppliers, what are you actually buying. So everything around spend. Then you have to cover everything around risk as well, because fundamentally a contract is there to manage risk. And that's what we do as procurement. We manage the spend, we manage the risk. So to digitize that as well then frees up a whole bunch more time for people to be doing this stuff. And then you actually get down into the job of sourcing itself. And
Right.
you know what? Creating an RFP, an RFQ, whatever, guess what that involves doing, right? It involves doing some Excel, doing some PowerPoint, putting this stuff together and sending it out. So, how can we then also digitize the sourcing bit? And of course, then you can get onto the contracting as well.
Right.
So, when I start looking at all of this, all of these things, there isn't one size fits all. You can go and find a big end to end solution. It's easy to do, but you can also find point solutions for all of these things. And we looked at it and we said, okay, well, for us, we really, because of the complexity in BT, it's such a big organization, we really need a point solution that does spend really well.
Yeah.
We need another one that does risk management and alerting incredibly well. And then we look at what are we actually buying, and we're buying so much stuff that's service based. We need an absolute brilliant solution for doing the sourcing for that.
Yeah.
And then we also need something that does a brilliant job at the sourcing as well for everything that isn't super complex services. And you start to look at these and you realize for some bits there's a point solution.
Mm-hmm.
But then you might take, but then for others, you need a point solution in the center, but then you need to add more information into it.
Yeah.
So you start saying, okay, well, if we have a risk management platform, well, we need to plug more information into it to make our risk management more robust, like a cybersecurity feed
Mm-hmm.
or a feed to tell us who are the tiers beneath in the hierarchy. And so you start building up this overall ecosystem of tools that is going to solve everything. But then for each use case, you're actually building a toolkit. So it might be one or two or three things within that toolkit. And then at the same time, looking at it from the outside, for myself in digital transformation, running this digital garage, I've got two sets of customers. I've got my customers that we know about, the people who are in BT source, the people who we're employing to free up their time. We're doing this. So we have toolkits for them to be able to do their strategy, to be able to do the sourcing, to be able to do the contracting. We've got the toolkits for them to do that stuff. But then interestingly, and this is where it gets super powerful, I have my customers around the rest of BT, the other thousands and thousands and thousands of employees in the rest of BT. Well, if I look at them and say, well, hang on, I have my colleagues in finance. Well, I can say, here's a finance toolkit by just taking a different subset of tools. I can say, interestingly, and this is the really cool stuff, is I can have a self-serve sourcing toolkit. So with certain parameters, with these consumer grade sourcing tools that we have now, consumer grade user interfaces, I can build a self-service sourcing toolkit for them. So under certain parameters, you know what, you don't even need to come to procurement because we can put the controls into the tools. And so that's where it becomes really, really powerful as well, is to be able to intercept work before it comes to procurement. So then you're freeing up, our fantastic folk in procurement. We're freeing them up from doing the really simple stuff, which really they don't need to be doing because we can digitize it as well.
Right. How is that then resonating? Because it's fascinating. You've been able to create ultimately a very targeted and personalized technology experience to stakeholders based on who they are, where they sit, and what they want to buy. I wonder, how does that resonating with stakeholders that they now perhaps feel like they have more control of the process than they did in the past?
Well, it's quite interesting where you have to start with this. And one thing that we're doing and putting a lot of efforts into, and this might sound crazy, is Procurement Essentials training for not procurement people, because we quite happily talk about sourcing and RFQs and RFPs and procurement and purchasing and all of these things. Well, we mustn't forget that isn't necessarily meaningful to the folk in the business.
Yeah.
They want to go and buy something. In the home life, they would go on the internet, maybe do a Google search because they know what they want, but they don't know where to get it from or where to get it cheaper. So it's like me. I go on Google, I search for something, find a suitable thing from the cheapest supplier and go in at it, go to that website and shop and buy it. In none of that interaction does anybody mention purchasing or sourcing or RFQs or any of this other terminology that we use.
Right.
Certainly nobody starts getting worried about, how do I validate that that's a good supplier to buy from? Probably at the most we would do in our home life is say, is there a Trustpilot rating for this website and is it good? That's about it. So we have to make sure with any of these self-serve sourcing tools that we have, and particularly with the toolkit, that we do the full thing end to end. So everybody has that idea of, I look for what I want, I find a suitable price, I find it from a trustworthy supplier, and I buy it. They don't we don't want them to worry about, oh, you need to have it go over to this team to
Right.
check the supply for this, make sure there's no disqualified directors, make sure it's not a sanctioned country. That all needs to be hidden away. So we link them together. And once we can explain things simply in the language that the people understand, and it is, then it really, really does help. And it sounded a little bit, this one has sounded a bit odd. I was explaining one of our sourcing tools to the business about a week ago. And I explained it and how it worked. You put the request in and it comes back and tells you the best price. And they said, oh, so basically it's just a price comparison website for anything that I want. Well, yes, effectively. It's
Right.
just that instead of a price comparison for one thing, you can do a price comparison and say, you know what, I actually want 20,000 TVs. I don't just want one. And
Yeah.
and we can do all of that stuff. So it's at that level. And when you can explain it in that way and say, guys, price comparison website, type the details in, click submit, come back the next day, there's the answer. If that's the one you want, click there and all the onboarding will happen and it'll turn up in a few days' time. That end-to-end journey in their language is the thing that really resonates.
It's funny how we sometimes get stuck in our own language, and we're so deep into this world of procurement that it's hard to take a step back and think, how do I simplify it? Because we've been taught all this language for so long, and it's so embedded in our brains, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And that isn't even getting into the governance bit. Yeah, as soon as you start overlaying governance and saying, well, okay, you need to have the person with the right delegation of authority level to be able to approve that you do this, and you need 3-way approvals and 4-way matching, and the mind then expands and blows, and that's where it gets really tough. Because it's easy to talk about simple examples. You talk about TVs and so forth,
Yeah.
but what about when you're trying to simplify with the governance? Because if you're trying to do the self-serve sourcing for simple products is one thing, but when it becomes more complex, the governance goes up through the roof. And so how do you then stop procurement from just being a postbox as well? Because our customers out in the business, they know best what they want. We're there as a translation tool to translate what they want into procurement speak so it can be pushed out to do a sourcing event. So bridging that gap is one thing to do. Then also bridging that governance gap is another fantastic thing to be able to do. And that's exactly what we're doing at the moment. It's not just taking care of the simple product and the simple service, but with Globality, this kind of coincidental, if you like, but with Globality, that complex services sourcing, you find, again, a consumer grade interface is really what counts, because I feel confident then of saying to the business, okay, well, instead of you telling me what you want, and then I translate that into my language, or maybe my colleague next time I translate it into his language and our procurement speak and then push out into the market, effectively, we're just getting in the way and delaying the process. So if we have something which can translate my needs, if I'm a procurement person putting it in, or translate the business needs even better before it even comes to me, then we can start to shorten the end-to-end process, give a better customer experience, and it works even better in the long term.
So ultimately what you're doing, and what a tool like Globality is helping the stakeholders do, is kind of at the very beginning of the process write their own statement of work, almost, or their own requirements document, or it's some way of them being able to articulate in a guided way what they want, so that we're not, as procurement, necessarily translating it, or maybe they're not asking for things that they don't want, or you get that risk of stakeholders not being able to articulate particularly well what exactly they need, and so perhaps they're over specifying, as an example.
Oh, exactly. And it's easy to do with products, because you can just put a form up and say, give me a part number or description. You say, okay, I want 78
Here's the
50-inch
drawing.
TVs. It's really easy, right? Or even better, here's a product number. There's no product number for management consultancy, because everything's different. So to have that, as you say, guided is the word. We talk about guided buying. We talk about, we use guided strategy creation as well when we create our category strategies. It's guiding people through the journey so that you get consistency and you get quality and you
Hmm.
don't miss something obvious. Yeah,
Yeah.
because missing something, or as you say, overly including too much, can scupper the whole thing, or at least make it, a very, very expensive when it needn't be.
And I think it's so important that you say guided, because so often, and I know that I speak from my personal experience of doing this in the past, where we believe perhaps that we know what the best outcome is for the business. And so it's like procurement presenting outcomes and strategies and potential suppliers and all those things without necessarily the business, the stakeholders coming along for that journey with us. And that creates a lot of the tension. Whereas when it's guiding, you're putting a lot more one, accountability, I think, back into the business, but power, like the ability to drive the conversation. So it is a collaboration versus us against them.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody can, um, get the wrong end of the stick as well. If somebody says this is what I want, it's very easy for us to misunderstand or get it wrong. So consistency is always a good thing, and it is wanting to drive towards simplification and just getting the definition of what we want really, really clean. So
Mhm.
to do that on product, as I say, product is easy. You get a product number. Simple services are easy. I mean, maybe we're saying we want somebody to come and fit, 1,000 carpet tiles. It's fairly easy. Here's the address, number of tiles. Here's the floor plan. It's an easy thing. But when it's much more complex, that's where it gets particularly difficult. And anything that's more complex, we also must remember that there's going to be a much tighter interaction between the business and whichever company ends up delivering that service. It's going to be
Mhm.
much, much more tightly meshed. So, whatever we can do to drive a better experience from day one for the customers, our internal customers, and the supplier who's supplying that, it just starts everything on the right foot.
So then what's the role of procurement post that data gathering stage? Is it does the guided technology then guide the stakeholder through the buying process, essentially the sourcing, the contracting, the negotiation process, or is procurement then stepping in and saying, okay, now we've got this, I'm going to take you through a more traditional offline process?
Yeah, so the answer is always is it really depends on the
Hmm.
exact thing and the size and the complexity that's coming through, um, because this is to initiate things. And as we go forward and we learn more, then we can turn on more into automation. But right now, capture the information, and then procurement can become involved and really lead on those negotiations. Because you might have the most fantastic statement of work that has ever been created through some amazing digital tool.
Hmm.
But that doesn't stop the suppliers going, yeah, that sharp
Hmm.
intake of breath like a builder. That's
Yeah,
going to cost you.
that's
There's
expensive.
no
Yeah,
knowledge in the business of really,
yeah,
am I being charged the right thing, not charged the right thing? Are these
yeah.
contractual terms right or are they wrong? Even if we have our panel of suppliers for whatever that category is, procurement needs to be there to ensure that the governance is adhered to correctly, to make sure that the supplier isn't trying to pull a fast one, to make sure that the business isn't over specifying. Yeah, we need to be there in those initial cases. And it would be wonderful if we can, get down the route of more and more and more automation. But for us, right now, the really big stuff, we intercept very, very manually and get our
Hmm.
arms around it completely because we're in that learning process. We're
Right.
learning, the business is learning, and you can see the evolution path, but we want to evolve sensibly. Yeah.
As you run that evolution, just more broadly at BT and BT Source in terms of your procurement transformation, how are you measuring success of that transformation? Like, what are you looking for to get the validation that this is working?
So there's always several things that are going to come into it. Some are data point driven. So the savings that we're generating for the business,
Hmm.
how are they measured? How are they landing? What's the size of them? Then you've got the customer experience stuff. We get to talk about actual customer experience as in a proper external customer now. how's our customer experience rating going? Are they getting what they need from us? And then we also have the ability now to measure the KPIs and
Hmm.
SLAs as a proper business and say, are we delivering on the time that we actually committed to? Are
Yeah.
we, responding at a fast enough rate to the correct degree of quality to do all of this stuff? So there's a lot of measures of success that we can put into this, but fundamentally, it is always for any procurement organization, it's always going to come down to how are you saving the money? How are you managing the risk? What's the
Hmm.
customer experience? So it's kind of those
Yeah.
big three things.
My last question really, as you think about, there'll be a lot of other organizations that are perhaps earlier in their journey to transform, and they're looking and being inspired by some of the things that you're doing at BT and BT Source. Now, I just wonder if you've got any advice for other leaders, other companies that are thinking about embarking on a transformation, but a digital-led transformation.
Um, I think there's always reasons to not start or reasons that
Hmm.
it's difficult to do, and I think as part of this series you've also have Dr. Eloise Epstein from
Yeah.
Kearney involved, and she has got a fantastic quote of there are no excuses. And there really are no excuses. There's no excuses why you can't start. There's no excuses on what the business case may be. There's always ways to do it, to pay for it. Um, and all of that is very, very possible. So there's no excuses to not start on the journey. But
Hmm.
then it's what to do. And from my point, there are so many tools out there and there's so many overlaps. You need to find two things. Number one, what is the best tool? Or certainly, what is the best subset or, two, three, four tools that would really work superbly well?
Hmm.
But then the second thing is, what is the one or the two which are going to work in the context of your company? Because
Yeah.
we've implemented some stuff and in BT source because it works for us. But just because, let's say, a spend analytics system for is utterly perfect for BT sourced,
Hmm.
it might not be for the next company because of our nuances, and
Yeah.
that's fine. So it's don't necessarily look at somebody and say, oh, they've done, they've implemented system XYZ, I need to do the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
You may, but just validate and double check that it is. Secondly, look at your customers. Your customers are twofold. They're the internal ones, so your procurement folk, but
Hmm.
do not overlook the rest of the business. With the tools that we've deployed, at certain points in that timeline, we actually have more users outside of procurement
Right.
using these than we had inside of procurement. The reference from, and it buys so much gratitude from the business. And even in one case, initiated a transformation program in another part of the business
Hmm.
because of the tooling that we deployed and what it enabled them to do. So um, look to what other people have been doing, but don't get too hung up on specifically the products that they've done. Look
Right.
to your customers, the internal and the external customers. And then it sounds obvious, but yeah, look at it from a consumer perspective. Yeah, what is that? Yeah, um, we all think about and we translate any part of a business that we don't understand. We translate it using our own personal experience. So with
Hmm.
procurement, people translate that as shopping when they're at
Yeah.
home because they do that. When anybody translates finance, they kind of translate that into their home finances and how they work. So it's the natural thing to do. So get away from the terminology, get away from the complexity, and start to think about things in how do I actually do this at home? And because that's what other people are going to look at, and how will it work for them?
That's great advice. It's about certainly your own. It's funny, oftentimes we hear people say, "Well, we have a unique situation here," and you look at that and think, sometimes that's an excuse, but we've talked a lot about best in whose class and following best in class just because it's on a pedestal and not really tailoring your environment for your organization. What each organization wants and needs from procurement is different from another. Yeah, very very I think important insights.
Yeah, and You can also look into the past. And if we go back to, let's say the 80s, yeah? Back in the early 80s, you wanted to send some information to somebody, you might write it out longhand and hand it to a typing pool who would type it up the next day, pop it in the post, and you know what? Maybe you get a reply the next week. That then speeded up and you had word processing. And guess what? People could actually do that typing themselves. And then you get email and things speed up even more. And just follow that process through. That's going to continue to evolve and keep going and keep going. And right now, people in 30, 40 years are going to look back on us and say, what was that all about? That was just so slow.
You type things, use the keyboard.
Yeah, exactly. And so you need to recognize that in procurement, particularly, we talk about industry 4.0, we talk about procurement 4.0. It's at that point right now where the advent of AI, of machine learning, of automation, all of these technologies are coming to fruition, coming to be realizable and usable, and it's no longer a pipe dream. This stuff exists, and you can see how it all works seamlessly together. Now is the time to elevate people's abilities, elevate their ability to do more by automating, by doing things. And it was Elon Musk who said a little while ago, you know what, we're all cyborgs. Everybody at the moment, particularly in the Western world, is a cyborg. We can answer any question instantly. We can translate anything instantly. We have 100% perfect recollection of any event ever. Why? Because we have one of these things. The only problem is that the data rate of our interface is really, really slow. It's called a thumb. Yeah. So the actual data rate of the interface is slow. But you can see where this is going. You can see that this is going to become more of the tool of choice, which is why all of the stuff we've deployed is available and usable over the mobile phone as well.
I could probably go deeper into that, but I know we're running out of time, and I do want to talk a little bit with Dr. Eloise about that very topic as well, which is going to be fascinating as part of the series. Adam, I want to thank you so much for joining us. My final question is the easy one, and that's if people would like to connect with you, reach out, learn a little bit more about what you're doing, or just have a good chat about digital transformation in procurement, where is the easiest place for them to find you?
Oh, dead easy. LinkedIn. So I'm connected to you, Phil, and I know that everybody listening will be connected to you. So that means you can easily find me. So just Adam Brown at companies BT sourced, or even just BT will pick me up. So LinkedIn is the best place.
All right, great. And if they're not connected to me, they should be as well. So a call to action there at the same time. Adam, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your journey and sharing the perspectives and the insights that you have on procurement transformation. I think that what you're doing and the work through BT Sourced is really transformational for procurement. So thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks for listening in to today's podcast, which is part of Transform, a thought-provoking new podcast series from Art of Procurement in partnership with Globality, where we are spotlighting the agenda-setting procurement leaders and companies who are changing the game and redefining the future of procurement. Now, as new episodes are published, you can find them all at artofprocurement.com/transform series. That's all one word, and that is, again, artofprocurement.com/transform series.